Everybody, we're back, and you're listening to the Pitchfork here on the Warfighter Up Radio Network. I'm your host, Gabe Lands, and we do this every Tuesday from 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern for you weirdos on the East Coast, and West Coast. Figure it out for yourselves. Go to your safe space and take cover, because you're probably going to hear things that will violate your human rights, and I recommend going to the nearest bathroom of the opposite gender on your birth certificate. Sorry, I don't know where that came from, but it just kind of came rolling out. Sorry about that, everybody. So I said before the break we were going to start talking about Puerto Rico because of just the insanity of our fiscal policy here in the United States and in the seriousness of the problem that is our national debt. We can see we're lucky. We can see a forecast of what is going to happen, what is coming our way, faster and faster and faster with every day that goes by that we take on more and more debt. We don't take with a hacksaw, with a chainsaw, with dynamite, with reckless abandon, start chopping at this massive bureaucracy known as government. And I'm serious. We need to take absolute drastic measures now, financially speaking, in order to try and stave off some of the impact that's coming. But it's still going to happen regardless. You can't meddle in our economy in the United States for as long and as intensely as has been done and not face the music for it. Face the consequences for the actions. So, keep in mind that, everything sounds bad about this. And it is, but it will get better. But it has to crash first. There has to be the correction. They'll call it a correction in the markets, where all of this intervention by the Federal Reserve, the government, Treasury, things like this, it all unwinds and it gets back to real markets, real valuations of bread, of rice, of sugar, where all these subsidizations of these programs, all these tariffs, and control of the import of all these items. Just for example, these items here, all that comes unwound, and it's actually the companies in the markets and the demand, real demand for the products that sets the prices versus government pulling the strings like a puppeteer on everything that we're involved with. A link just went live in the chat thread at facebook.com/groups/thepitchfork. Go like our page if you haven't already, and you can follow along with the article we're going to talk about now. And it's titled, Venezuela Resorts to Changing Time Itself to Survive Socialism as Food Shortages and Power Outages Worsen. So we have reported a little bit on this. It's hard to find any information because obviously they don't want, the media and powers that be in the government, whatever, they don't want people to see what's happening around us. When we could be talking about a man who has a mental illness, thinks he's a woman, and wants to go and potty in the girls' room. So, I'll just get into the article here. And it's coming from Dollar Vigilante for those of you who aren't able to follow along. dollarvigilante.com. When heavily socialist countries collapse, and they always do, it's always interesting to watch what they do near the end. Venezuela is the latest, and its activities have gotten more bizarre by the day. A few weeks ago, as we reported, the Central Bank of Venezuela blamed hyperinflation on a website. They then began flying in literal plane loads of the Venezuelan bolivar. That's their cash, their currency. Not kidding. Flying in money in cargo planes to cure hyperinflation one-ups helicopter Ben Bernanke, the ex-chairman of the Federal Reserve. Then it became too expensive to print the Venezuelan bolivar, and it cost more to print pictures of the dead criminals on pieces of paper than the paper itself cost. They tried rolling electricity blackouts to save money, and they tried food rationing, which we talked about here, the electricity rationing and turning it off certain portions of the city for certain amounts of time. I think it was like a week at a time, no less. And then, as the economy completely ground to a halt, the government announced a rise in the minimum wage, I think this was last week, by 30%. Oh, this was this weekend. Like, that's really going to help. So you got hyperinflation, prices of everything's going through the roof. People are making this much money. It doesn't work because everything's more expensive. They didn't get a pay raise. So they're going to raise the minimum wage by 30% in order to try and keep people's wages up with hyperinflation, and it's only going to compound the issue. This is me talking here. And now, in the latest move, the Venezuelan government said it's going to change time itself. At 2:30 a.m. on Sunday, the Venezuelan government decreed that time had moved forward by 30 minutes to 3 a.m. in an effort to save money. You cannot make this stuff up. They should just move time forward 2 years to a time when the whole system collapses and people can begin rebuilding from the rubble of socialism. Sadly, however, this comedy is a tragedy for millions of Venezuelans who live under a criminal socialist regime that's now entered into near starvation levels as the country and its currency have completely collapsed. So this is happening right now, everybody. Like, realize the implications of this. This is happening right now in a country a few thousand miles away south of us. This is real. This isn't, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago, and you're reading about it in a history book. This is happening right now, modern day. So it's not like this is out of the realm of possibility. We're a lot bigger than Venezuela, don't get me wrong, and we're a lot more wealthy as a country in general, but doesn't mean we're immune from the same exact effects. So, a few weeks ago, I, along with Luke Rudowski of We Are Change, if you guys haven't ever seen anything from Luke Rudowski, some of it's kind of some of it's actually pretty good. Independent journalist who goes in onto the ground. For the most part, pretty decent coverage. Flew into the murder capital of the world, Caracas, Venezuela, to see what the country collapse looked like. There's a link to a video if you want to watch their actual video titled, "You Won't Believe What We Saw in Socialist Venezuela." I had last visited Venezuela in 2008, and it was very nice. I spent time in the nice parts of Caracas at high-end restaurants and partied the night away at big discotheques full of beautiful women. The people were optimistic, and after all, Hugo Chavez had great plans for the country. A lot can change in 8 years. We arrived and were met by some dollar vigilante readers, some of the only anarcho-capitalists in Venezuela. After discreetly changing $100 for a backpack full of bolivars with some guy in the airport, we were told to make a dash for the car we had waiting outside. Apparently, the airport is the most dangerous part of Caracas, as that is where people wait for foreigners to come in, kidnap, or rob them. We managed to get out of the airport unscathed and on time, but little else went according to plan. We intended to stay for 4 days, but we left after 36 hours. It was simply just too difficult and dangerous to stay. While I was there, a brave and very helpful dollar vigilante reader, Daniel, snuck us into the barrios where he lived to show us what conditions were like. His house was basically a concrete foundation with some sheets and corrugated metal making up the walls and ceilings. It was there where they conducted an interview with him below, which the link is posted. gives a view from on the ground of how Venezuela went from a country rich in wealth and natural resources to one of complete squalor, food shortages, and rampant crime and murder in just a few years. Here's something Americans should take note of. Everything that Venezuela has been doing over the last 8 years is very similar to what's been happening in the U.S. Socialism, massive government deficits, central bank money printing, never-ending rules and regulations, and gun control. That's what caused what's happening in Venezuela, and that's what's happening now in the U.S. In fact, all throughout the West. If you want to see the future, visit Venezuela. So, click that link and watch the videos. It's interesting to see, and like they said, in a matter of 8 years, they went from, a somewhat thriving economy, decent areas, to everyone's in electricity rationing, food shortages, rampant crime, murder capital of the world. It's a stark reality to face, and it's going to be different for us here in America because we don't live in shacks with corrugated metal, roofs for the most part. You have houses and our neighborhoods, things like that. They're not going to fall apart and go away. But if you can't buy gas, can't put it in your lawnmower to mow your lawn, it might be more important to put that gallon of gas you get a week in your car so you can drive to whatever job it is you have, right? What's going to happen then? You're not going to mow your lawns. Everything's going to overgrown. Don't have the time or the money or really the priorities to place on maintenance of things. It's going to run out. Can't afford to buy replacement parts. Can't afford to buy cleaners, whatever. It's going to be a continuous spiral downwards. So insulate yourself from this. Get educated, everybody. I'm telling you. This is the type of stuff you need to be paying attention to. Not this whole he said, she said, he's a she, she's a he, go to the bathroom wherever you want ordeal. It's not important. This stuff is because it's happening, and it's coming to us on a freight train. And look, there's another country right here, Puerto Rico. I'll post a link to this. I've talked about Puerto Rico last week, how they said they were going to default on their debt. Well, coming from Fortune.com, links in the chat there if you want to follow along. Puerto Rico's governor says that the island's going to default on Monday, which was yesterday. Puerto Rican officials talked through ahead of a major debt payment due on Monday, with the U.S. territory's governor predicting default and chances slipping for a restructuring deal with creditors. Speaking to reporters on Wednesday, Governor Alejandro Garcia Padilla said that there will be a default on Monday, adding, "I don't think there is a deal on the table that avoids a default." And we talked about this last week. Restructuring talks are ongoing between GDB and the creditor group holding more than $1 billion of roughly $4 billion in total debt. The group includes hedge funds, Solis, Brigade, and Claren Road. And what's crazy is this is Puerto Rico, and their entire debt is $4 billion. And that's like the budget for the VA. Just one agency in our federal government. But this entire country is going to default on that. So, government news. We're kind of coming up on the end of the show here. I'm only going to do an hour today because I got things I have to do tonight. But I kind of want to go over some other headlines. I'm just going to read the headlines to you. Let's see here. California minimum wage hike hits the LA apparel industry. The exodus has begun. Apparel industry and producers are leaving LA. Let's see here. United Healthcare exits most Obamacare exchanges, over $1 billion in losses. We talked about that. See here. Looting on the rise as Venezuela runs out of food, from Pan Am Post. Sports Authority here in the United States. Sports Authority closing all 450 of its stores. You heard that right. All 450 stores of Sports Authority are going to be closing. That's on top of what we talked about with the railroads. That the railroads had people on layoff or furlough now at higher rates or as high as the recession in 08 and 09. rail traffic's down, reduced.